comedies, more than I would say any other genre, benefit from the collective experience. I love horror too. I love thrillers. I love the feeling of like, being very tense with other people. But I think that we've robbed ourselves of the opportunity to feel a comedy with other people and to laugh. I mean, the experiences people are having so far in theaters for this movie are just blowing my mind.
Hello, welcome to the Rolling Stone studio. My name is David Fear. I'm a senior editor and critic here at the magazine. There's 3 rules you need to know for any dinner party. These are just basic dinner party 101 rules. You never cook a souffle because then it will inevitably go wrong. You always make sure you're well stocked with wine because if you don't, things could get weird. And if you plan on your dinner party turning into a long, dark night of the soul, just make sure Edward Norton is there to facilitate it. Now, Olivia Wilde, filmmaker, actor, dinner party host, cinematic dinner party host,
Yes.
made sure that at least one of those rules, the last one, was there, and I think it's pretty key. The best way to describe this movie, a couple who live in San Francisco are having some issues, and they invite their neighbors
Yes.
from upstairs to have a dinner party, and things take a turn.
Yes.
It stars Olivia, it stars Seth Rogen, it stars Edward Norton and Penelope Cruz. It is currently playing in theaters, and it's out everywhere July 10th. Olivia Wilde, welcome to our fake living room.
Oh my God, thank you.
Right.
So good to be here.
The whole decor for this was like, give me Call Her Daddy studio, but make it for people who argue about Foghat albums. Right?
That's exactly
Kind of nails it, right?
Nailed it.
Okay.
Perfect.
So I like to pride myself on feeling like I know a lot about movies, and I know movies that are out there. I had not heard of the Spanish film, The People Upstairs, that this film is based on. And I don't think you had either, right?
I had not.
Got Will McCormick and Rashida Jones' script cold?
Exactly. Yeah. And then I watched the original film, which was directed and written by a guy named Seth Gay, who actually first had written a play, directed said play, adapted his work into this film, which was called Sentimental in Spain, and then The People Upstairs here. And it wasn't massive, but it was well loved in Spain. And it had a ripple effect because then there were adaptations made in Italy, South Korea, Germany, France, and probably more. And then Will McCormick and Rashida Jones wrote the English adaptation. Mm-hmm. That came to me. I read it and I thought, oh my God, this reminds me of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. This could be my experience that I've always wanted, which is to have the 12 Angry Men experience Sidney Lumet created of like, let's shoot it in one room, let's rehearse the damn thing, and then let's let it evolve as we shoot it. So it was like this piece of material allowed for this opportunity that I've been looking for my whole career, which required pulling together a badass group of people, these actors who became authors of this project just as much as the rest of us.
Yeah, let's talk about, before we get to your role in this in front of the camera, let's talk about assembling this cast, because it really feels like a supergroup. On paper, you think, oh, all 4 of these actors have kind of distinct styles, and I don't quite know how these are all going to sort of...
feels like a Mad Libs. It's like, wait, who's in this?
We need a verb, Seth Rogen.
Yes.
We need an adjective, Edward Norton. No, and then when you come together, I mean, I kept using the supergroup analogy when I saw this at Sundance, because you're like, oh, they actually figured out a way to sync this, where it's the sum of the whole parts, and this kind of works. But you knew Seth Rogen from doing The Studio.
Yes.
How did you bring him in, and how did Edward and Penelope get involved?
Well, I knew Seth from The Studio. I also knew Seth for like 20 years because I actually auditioned for Knocked Up.
Oh.
And we had
for Seth's role, right?
For Seth's role, yeah. That bastard got the part. But we really clicked. Like, we always knew there was something simpatico there. And then I just revered him. I just loved not only how he created his career, but also just the humanity he put into everything. He's always felt to me like an Albert Brooks, and he's now, I think, hit that place. Yeah. I always also mention like an 80s Richard Dreyfuss. He has, Dreyfuss, What About Bob era energy in this movie. And he's just a little less tightly wound. My character's a little more Dreyfuss.
I feel like the jury's still out on that, but sure, I'll take your word for it. Okay.
But I just think Seth has this quality that is so clearly unique and kind of it's its own thing. It's not in any way connected to like fads or trends. He's timeless in his skills. I just think he's the best. And when he created the studio, I was like, of course you guys fucking did that. Of course you guys went and had the greatest idea and did the thing that no one thinks you can do, which is to make something about the industry, but make it really, really honest and cynical and funny, but loving. And it really
there's a weird balance of like the Los Angeles eats itself genre of like showbiz, because showbiz, I don't need to tell you this, showbiz loves to like stab themselves in the chest and be like, we really hate ourselves, don't we? We have so much self-loathing.
Yeah.
And yet there is something about like, no, the magic of the movies and doing all this, which is why I feel like he got Martin Scorsese and you and Zoe Kravitz and like everybody to come show up.
Yes. Everybody got to have fun and kind of, I think, relax and play, but it's within a very carefully constructed framework.
Yeah.
So when I went on the studio and I had like 2 days of observing this operation, I was so inspired. And seeing Seth do his thing up close, I just realized all of a sudden, I was like, oh my God, he has to play Joe. He is Joe. And I became obsessive. And once I become obsessive, it's like lights out. That's it. It has to happen. And I, at that point, wasn't supposed to be in the invite, but I was putting it together to direct it. And Seth just, he brought it to life for me in my imagination. I suddenly could see it. I could feel it. And then Edward and Penelope, they actually were really drawn to the movie based on Edward loved the original film. He reached out to me and was like, I heard you're remaking this movie. I have to be a part of it because I love this movie and I have an idea. Turned out he had many ideas that were
as is his want,
that were all gold. And Penelope as well, she came on board, and I've always loved Penelope as a comedian. I feel like in this country,
have you seen Official Competition?
That's what I was going to say.
Oh my God.
It's perfect. Yeah. She's perfect.
Brilliant.
She plays a female director in the funniest possible way. She's kind of a combination of so many people that
based on a real director specifically, but even if you don't know that, genius. And actually, she told me they're making a sequel, which I'm very excited. Oh my God, are we breaking news?
We're breaking news.
This podcast is officially breaking news right now, people.
It's allowed. But I really admire her as a comedian, and I admire her as an actress who brings so much complexity, so much strength and warmth. It was everything I needed because that role could have easily been pretty two-dimensional. It could have been, one-dimensional. It could have been, but I wanted three-dimensional.
No, it's a good call.
I really just felt lucky that they were all organically drawn to this. And then we gathered for this 2-week rehearsal process with Will and Rashida. And the 6 of us just tore through this thing. And we had this experience that I've always wanted to have, which is true collaboration, true workshopping of material. Best idea wins, taking massive swings, trying things out, being willing to fail, trying other things, ripping things apart and putting them back together until we created kind of our own collective adaptation of the adaptation.
Well, listen, I'm just a guy with a wizard's beard who likes the moving pictures. I don't know a lot about the industry, how the sausage is made, but this sounds like an unusual way to make a movie.
Yes.
And this was part of the thing. When you read the script, you were like, no, I think this is a chance to actually do this.
It was also a chance to do something else I'd really wanted to do, which is shoot in order. So sequential shooting because it was in one location.
Right.
And we got to shoot on 35 millimeter.
How was that?
That was a dream.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Dream come true.
Let's take one step back. I do want to hear about what you guys got out of this rehearsal period, but I'm given to understand that there was originally a different actor cast in your role. You then had to be convinced to kind of step in and do.
Yes. There was someone who was very graciously interested, and she's a very busy person, and she couldn't do it. And I thought, oh man, I'm going to have to break the news to everybody. Like, that person who thought she could do it, she can't do it. And they all said, okay, good, finally, can you just step in and do it? And I was like, wait, what do you mean? They said, you keep giving us these names of people who could do this, but we don't understand why you're not just jumping in. And it had not occurred to me. I was like, in what world can I act across from Edward Norton and Penelope and Seth?
I mean, that's a subjective question, because I'm sure plenty of people would be like, you've more than earned the right to act across.
But I had this like imposter syndrome about it.
Right. I would have thought that maybe you had reluctance because you were also directing this and the idea of trying to like dial in as an actor and dial in as a filmmaker. I mean,
completely.
Everyone's done it. Edward Norton's done it. Like,
yeah.
But it just seems like a bit of a schizophrenic experience.
Yeah. I mean,
sorry if I'm offending schizophrenic people.
Yes.
Please don't at me in the comments. I'm very sorry. Go ahead.
It is definitely splitting your brain in between two jobs. But for this movie in particular, it ended up being essential because we were a very small little crew and it was like one less body on set. I mean, there were no monitors, there's no like chairs, there was none of that stuff. We were all together on this set that we built on a stage. And I got to be so inside the energy of the performances that as a director, I could feel when we were on the right path. And I think that would have been harder to feel from behind the camera. I think there was this ability to witness what these actors were doing from the inside so that I could see what we hadn't yet captured on film.
Interesting.
And I think that, yes, my imposter syndrome was both like, can I be on the level with these masters as actors, but also can I do that work while also not dropping the ball as their director? Because what we were doing from a kind of logistical standpoint, just in terms of like the crew and myself, was not a simple task. And I wanted the actors to feel liberated and effortless, but you know, the actual construction of the visual style was not something that was effortless, and I wanted to make sure I could maintain that.
I want to talk briefly about my favorite scene in the film, my favorite sequence, and I'm going to try to make this as spoiler-free as possible. But there's a sequence involving a window.
Yes.
And it is a window that looks in, you can see into your apartment from your upstairs neighbor's apartment and vice versa. And there is a really lovely sense of escalation that happens where it's the banter starts getting a little quicker, the velocity picks up, the editing starts becoming a little choppier, not in a bad way, obviously, but like you really feel this kind of like screwball whirring kind of coming up. And I'm just curious about how you guys were able to figure that out, how you were able to figure that out as a filmmaker and an actor. How are we going to build this? The art of awkward tension that escalates and builds and builds and builds until there's this huge payoff.
That was a real benefit of shooting in order, I have to say, because we could sense when the energy needed to shift, when the tone needed to kind of follow a slightly different rhythm. And I say we because it was really not only the actors, but it was almost a matter of the crew kind of improvising with us. You could feel when the energy needed to take another turn. Certainly when we were putting the script together in rehearsals and we were aware of the benefit of surprising the audience and taking them down one path and then taking a sharp left turn, we knew we wanted that shift. But while we were actually in production, Seth and I would say, okay, now that we've had that moment of energy down here, we need to take it up. Or we've been up here, we need to take it down. Let's find a way to do this next scene in a way that drives the energy slightly differently. But that scene in particular, what I love now is sitting in theaters and feeling the audience not expecting it and then feeling themselves kind of run off the tracks with the train in the way that we intended, right? And so there becomes, the comedy of errors becomes a little bit more of like a dramatic comedy of errors, and the tension becomes a little more dangerous, we hope. But it was
dangerous is a good word for it.
Dangerous is good. We really we really plugged into something that felt outside of ourselves. I have to say, it sounds so hokey, but sometimes you feel you are responding to what the movie wants to be, and that's what happened.
Well, in the spirit of therapy, let's talk more about that.
Yes.
Because I was lucky enough to talk to Will and Rashida a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about being on set and kind of rewriting this almost in real time,
Yes.
where you guys would have these rehearsals or more like workshops, it sounds like, where you were sitting around a table and like discussing your own relationships, discussing what you thought made for a healthy relationship,
Yes.
discussing, all these different things that then sort of made it into the film. I think
Yes.
Seth in his New York Times interview said that like 2/3 or half of the film were kind of made in the weeks leading up to shooting.
For sure.
So did you guys get something out of that? I mean, you actually had a
yeah.
celebrity therapist as a consultant, so I'm assuming this was therapeutic.
It was extremely therapeutic. It was very vulnerable and really fascinating because you don't often realize how subjective the idea of a healthy relationship is until you sit with other couples or other people and hear what they consider to be normal. And then you realize, like, wait a minute. And we were all in very different places in our lives, but had shared a similar amount of relationship therapy. Like, we had all been overly heavily therapized. And you're right, in the 2 weeks leading up, that's when that like real restructuring, rethinking of it happened. And then once we were on set, it was really the cast just improvising and responding to who we all knew these characters were at that point. But the 2 weeks leading up was when it was very, very much a sharing session that allowed for people's personal anecdotes to make it in there. And man, a lot of the stuff that's in the movie is based on stories that people shared about their own lives, and some of the funny, silly stuff, like all this fascination Edward's character has with rugs is based on a friend of his. There's so much that is just based on real life that we wanted that specificity, which I think audiences can feel. It feels authentic when it's specific.
Yeah. I saw this at Sundance. I was lucky enough to be at the premiere for this, and I started thinking about this film and then your previous film. And look, you can like Don't Worry, Darling, or you can dislike it, or you can roll your eyes at the hypocritical, toxic discourse that was around it that distracted from the movie. That's your call. But you can't say it's not ambitious. You can't say it isn't a big film with a lot of different sets, a lot of different ideas. It has scale, it has scope. And then you look at this film, and it's 4 people. I mean, there's a lot going on, don't get me wrong, but there's 4 people in one apartment, other than a couple of scenes outside while you're shopping and Seth's coming home.
Yeah.
And it feels very concentrated. I'm just wondering if after having made Don't Worry, Darling, which did seem like it was a very like arduous process to make it, you wanted something simpler. You were looking for something that was a bit more concentrated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I always think about after Mike Nichols made Catch-22, just massive production, he then went and made Carnal Knowledge. And Carnal Knowledge isn't as intimate and one, location-based as ours, but the idea was he wanted to get back to relationships. He just wanted to get back to people relating to each other and characters relating to each other. And that's really what I felt. I wanted to kind of get out of the way of the actors, get out of the way of performances and say, can you just allow relationships and human beings kind of interacting, can you allow that to be interesting enough? And what happens when you strip away all the kind of bells and whistles, which I love the bells and whistles. I love action. I love car chases. I love magical realism. I love it all. But this was like tying my hands behind my back and just saying, like, can I still tell the story without all the stuff? And boiling it down is actually really satisfying, and it's a great kind of gut check in terms of like, what do you really like to say? What do you really like to do? What are you interested in as a storyteller? And for me, it's just watching people relate to each other.
Yeah, there's few things I find, and this is even more as I get older, but like I find it fascinating to just watch people talk on screen when it's done right.
Yeah.
Like, obviously we can both think of examples where you're sort of like, when are they going to cut? Or what I would give for a car chase or a ninja fight in the middle of this long conversation that just seems to be going nowhere.
Yes.
But, the greatest gift that the movies have ever given us is a close-up. And when you've got somebody, a really good actor, saying really great lines, really connecting to somebody else on screen, there's nothing more compelling about it.
Exactly. And I always think, if you're going to make a movie, particularly if it's an adaptation, you better understand why you're choosing this medium. Like, why not a book? Why not a play?
Yeah.
If it's because you want the audience to have a visceral connection to these characters, you want them to feel like they're telepathically connected to them, then a movie's a really good idea. And the camera has a very special skill, which is that it brings you into the emotional space. You can illustrate subtext in a way. In this film, we really embrace music in that sense, but certainly the cinematography. Adam Newport-Berra, the first thing he said to me was, we're going to turn faces into landscapes, and the audience will think they've been on this journey when we have not left this very small space.
It's funny, Paul Thomas Anderson talks about, they go, why are you filming your films in 70 millimeter, when it's something like One Battle After Another, when there's so many shots that are just a close-up of like an actor or a close-up of a face? And he's like, why wouldn't you shoot that in 70 millimeter? Why wouldn't you want that blown up on the biggest canvas possible? That's where it happens.
Yes.
Like that's where the magic is right there.
Yeah, and that's also like where film has evolved to. I mean, we didn't start out this way. It used to be, that we were presenting these scenes in a much more theatrical sense. We were in wides, and there's skill in that is masterful when you look at the greats that kind of began this work. But now we've gone through this evolution, and we are now able to really bring people into a very different kind of space with performances. And when you have actors as good as these people, like, why wouldn't I put you right up in there? And I mean, every time I watch the film, I notice something else they're doing, because there's just so much complexity to the choices they made.
I'm glad that you brought this up, this bringing people to a space here, because you went really hard in the paint to get this a theatrical release.
Hell yeah.
Which on the surface, you'd be like, well, it's a comedy with 4 movie stars
Yeah.
in it. This should not be a hard sell. And yet it is, which brings us to a bigger issue. So I'm just curious, since I have you here, other than studios being far more interested in just doing IP films, would have a built-in fan base, and the entire star system that actually minted stars to be able to make this comedy, and show business being broken in general, why do you think comedies are such a hard sell in terms of theatrical release right now?
I don't know. I don't know why the studios think the audiences don't want to see comedies in theaters. I don't think it's based in the audience. It is fascinating to see how people have relegated the comedy to something that does not need a theatrical, doesn't need a big screen, and mostly doesn't need film. And when you say, like, well, we want to shoot this on film and put it in a theater, people think, like, well, that feels unnecessary. It's not something massive in scope, and it can be felt the same way at home. Obviously, it can't. Mm-hmm. And comedies, more than I would say any other genre, benefit from the collective experience. I love horror too. I love thrillers. I love the feeling of, like, being very tense with other people. But I think that we've robbed ourselves of the opportunity to feel a comedy with other people and to laugh. I mean, the experiences people are having so far in theaters for this movie are just blowing my mind. My favorite anecdote so far is that we end the film, the end credits are the demo version of Our House, which is Graham Nash singing with Joni Mitchell. And there's a part of that after the second verse where Graham Nash messes up and he goes, shit. And it's my favorite part of the demo. And somebody wrote on Letterboxd that they said the shit out loud as they were sitting in their seat, and another person, a girl across the aisle, said it at the same time, and they looked at each other, and then they met up and shared a burrito after the movie. And I was like, this is the reason we made this movie, for those two to split that burrito. But I mean, like, where else do you get that experience? Live music, you get this experience of meeting strangers and you're moved together. But why has the comedy been taken out of the theater? I don't understand it. I think it's shifting. I feel it shifting.
I hope so.
Yeah.
We're here talking about The Invite, and I don't know whether a lot of people know this or not, but we're about to start a Hot Olivia Summer. Because The Invite is out now.
Yes.
And it goes wide in a couple of weeks. We already got that business out of the way. A Gregg Araki film that you're in called I Want Your Sex. I'm curious, because I saw both these films at Sundance when they premiered, and they're in weird conversation with each other.
They are,
it's really,
unintentionally.
Right. Which one came first?
I Want Your Sex. I shot it while I was prepping The Invite. So I was, for me now, acting in another person's movie, I like to say it's like espionage, because I'm just buying on other directors and, like, learning from them, trying not to steal their secrets.
Sure, you with this tiny spy camera, just taking like little.
But I really love, directors never get to see each other work. We operate in silos. And so I have this fun opportunity to go and observe other people, and Gregg Araki is his own thing completely, and he sticks to that, which I have such admiration for. That movie is very different in every way, but you're right, they're in conversation because it's also talking about sex in a way that is challenging what has kind of happened to the larger conversation about sex, specifically in this country, but I think beyond. Gregg has a very specific take on what he thinks generationally is happening with people having sex or not. The Invite is a little bit more about, I think, like, what happens when we don't talk about it, and that there are, people contain multitudes. They also contain a multitude of sexual fantasies they don't talk about, even with their partners. So it was only after I made them both that I was like, oh, wait a minute, they're absolutely a double feature.
It was funny to have a lot of conversations about those two films at the festival, because there were some people that were very uncomfortable talking about it, and then some people that were like, fucking finally.
Yes.
Finally, we're getting movies that are coming back to like the kind of bygone era of films when you could make them about adults doing adult things, which includes adults having consensual sex, some of which may or may not involve pegging, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, which, no judgment. Do what
Weirdly,
you wanna do.
both movies involve pegging.
Both movies involve pegging. Only one of them shows it.
That's my common denominator.
We'll let people figure out which one is which. That way it doubles your ticket sales.
Yes.
Why do you think sex is still considered this weird hot button issue in terms of how it's portrayed on screen?
It's funny because then you look at like heated rivalry, right? Like we are in this age where people are much more open, at least in the streaming world, I guess. But maybe that's because you're at home. Maybe people are still afraid to take this out into public. Maybe there is a sense that this is something that still we like, it's all fine as long as it's behind closed doors. When no, actually the joy of sitting with people and sharing the shock and recognition of self is the fun of it. And it is a bygone era because you think of like Paul Mazursky, you think of Bob Carroll, Ted and Alice, and it was the perfect way to send up the world of like, enlightenment and therapy and like Esalen and all these things. Yeah. But it was also very relatable and like bonding for people. So I think that the idea of sexuality is not something people are uncomfortable with, but I think the idea of sharing those conversations in a public forum is something that we still feel a little bit like nervous about, but the nerves are what make it fun.
Just one last question before we go, and thank you so much for stopping by the studio here. From the outside, it seems like it would be very easy to be like, oh, Olivia Wilde's about to have a moment, right? And I'm wondering, from your perspective, if you feel like these two films coming out at this particular moment in your career, do you feel like some sort of corner's been turned? As a creative artist, do you feel like you've sort of hit a different space? Like, do you feel more confident in what you're doing now?
I definitely feel more confident. I think that it is also just age. I really think there's something great that happens with age, and particularly if you've been lucky enough to work in one field for a while. I've been doing this for 20 years. I feel a sense of just real curiosity about things without the kind of white-knuckled anxiety about making it. Like, I think you spend a lot of the beginning part of your career just hoping to have the chance, right? You're like, just like, let me on screen, let me do this, let me try. Then you if you're lucky, you get to a point where you're like, okay, now what do I actually want to learn? What do I want to say? And I feel much more interested in the kind of the conversation of it, like the process of it, as opposed to proving something with any sort of result. I also think once you go through peaks and valleys, you hit this place that just feels much more interesting, which isn't so based on response. It's based in just in the experience of it itself. And honestly, just age. Getting older is great.
There are pitfalls. I mean, I can say this as an 87-year-old man. There are some pitfalls.
You look amazing.
Well, for that age, sure. Like, your joints hurt. You're a little stiffer in the morning getting up. Your bones creak. But yeah, the combination of accrued wisdom and experience and to be able to look back and be like, well, those were mistakes. At least I won't make those ones again.
Exactly.
And to try and learn from them. Like, it's invaluable.
Didn't Miles Davis say it takes you a long time to learn to sound like yourself? I think there's a sense of like, you finally know what your own sound is. And I admire people who know that when they're 24, like some people can like turn 24 and make Citizen Kane. Others can't. And I think for me, I feel this sense of having matured into a place where I kind of understand what I do, and I'm having a lot more fun with it. I feel very relaxed in it, and I just hope I get to keep going.
Keep going.
Okay.
Thanks so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.